It started on a sunburned afternoon off the coast of California. A young woman in designer heels laughed as she pointed at the black mechanic wiping his hands on a rag. You? Fix my car? 10 minutes. If it runs, I'll pay double. If not, you'll wash it for a month. The crowd erupted in laughter, phones raised, the sun flashing off every screen. But no one knew that within minutes, the sound of that engine would silence them all and set off a chain of events that would expose a buried truth, redeem a forgotten man, and change two lives forever. What began as a bet would become a reckoning, and by the time it ended, she wouldn't just learn how engines work. She'd finally learn how hearts do. The afternoon sun glared off the chrome bumper of a silver Porsche 911, its hood propped open like a wounded bird. The breeze from the Pacific carried the scent of salt and sunscreen through the parking lot of the Sea Breeze Resort, where a small crowd had already gathered. Tourists, beachgoers, and the kind of people who never missed a chance to film someone else's bad day. In the center of it all stood Chloe Davenport, her heels clicking impatiently against the pavement, one manicured hand pressed to her forehead. Her friends hovered around her like satellites, designer sunglasses, iced lattes in hand, murmuring sympathy that sounded more like amusement. Unbelievable, Chloe muttered, glaring at the engine. Dad loved this car. He swore she'd outlive us all, and now she dies in front of the damn resort. From behind the row of parked cars, a deep, calm voice spoke. Mind if I take a look? Chloe turned, startled. A man stood there, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a navy blue coverall streaked with grease and sunlight. His skin glistened under the heat. His eyes, dark and steady, held no arrogance, just quiet assurance. The name patch on his chest read, M. Reed. He carried a small toolkit, the kind that looked too humble for a car that cost more than some houses. Her friend Savannah leaned over, whispering loud enough for everyone to hear. Oh, God, is he a mechanic? From the garage down the street? Chloe crossed her arms, half amused, half annoyed. Apparently, you think you can fix a Porsche, Miss Reed, was it? He nodded once. Marcus Reed. I can take a look, Monomasis, till I see what she's saying. She's saying? Chloe let out a sharp laugh. It's a car, not a therapy patient. The small crowd chuckled with her. Marcus didn't flinch. He crouched beside the front bumper, listening. The sound of waves rolled behind them, the occasional seagull calling like punctuation in the silence. Well, Chloe said, slipping on her sunglasses, since you're so confident, let's make this interesting. She raised her voice just enough for her friends' phones to pick up. Fix it in 10 minutes, and I'll pay you double. Fail, and you wash it for a month. Deal? Savannah giggled. You're savage. Marcus rose to his full height, wiping his hands on a rag. I don't make bets, ma'am. I fix things, but I'll take a look. His calmness disarmed her more than any argument could have. She watched as he leaned over the open hood, hands moving with unhurried precision. He didn't fumble or hesitate. He listened. Literally listened, the way someone might listen to a heartbeat. His head tilted slightly, ear close to the engine block, fingers resting lightly against the metal. It was the strangest thing she'd ever seen, and yet there was something almost reverent about it. A teenager nearby whispered, He's not even using a scanner. Marcus murmured something under his breath, too quiet to catch. He reached into his toolbox, pulled out a small flathead screwdriver, and tightened a loose connection. Then he used a small piece of copper wire to bridge a contact point near the ignition coil. No drama, no grand gestures. Chloe checked her watch. 8 minutes. He gave her a brief nod. Try starting her now. She frowned but slid into the driver's seat. The leather was hot against her legs. She turned the key, half expecting another embarrassing cough from the engine. Instead, the car came alive, smooth, steady, a deep purr that vibrated through her chest. It was like the car exhaled after holding its breath too long. The crowd gasped. Someone cheered. Marcus stepped back, wiping his hands again. Nothing major, he said. Loose ground near the ignition. Happens more often than people think. You're good now. Chloe blinked at the dashboard lights glowing perfectly green. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. That's it? That's all it was? Yes, ma'am. Her friend's laughter was suddenly the worst sound in the world. Savannah clapped slowly. Looks like you owe him double, girl. Chloe's cheeks burned. She grabbed her purse and pulled out a crisp $100 bill. Here, I guess congratulations are in order. Marcus didn't move to take it. Keep it. he said quietly. You don't owe me anything. The car just needed someone to listen. The words hung in the air. A few people exchanged puzzled glances. Someone from the back muttered, "Man talks like a preacher." Chloe shoved the bill back into her purse, hiding her discomfort with a half smile. Well, thank you, Mr. Reed. You've officially made my day. Interesting. He nodded once more, gave the car a gentle pat on the hood, and turned to leave. She watched him walk toward a weathered pickup parked under a palm tree. His steps were slow but certain, as if nothing about this little spectacle mattered to him at all. When he drove off, the crowd began to disperse, still buzzing about what they'd seen. One of the onlookers, a young influencer with a selfie stick, looked straight into her camera. Did y'all see that? Dude fixed a Porsche in 9 minutes. A black mechanic from a beachside garage. Rich girl's face? Priceless. By the time Chloe got home that evening, the video had 500,000 views. The caption read, "Rich CEO versus local mechanic, guess who won?" The comments were merciless, half laughing at her, half praising him. She poured herself a glass of wine and sank onto her couch, staring at the muted TV. The hum of her apartment felt too still. She replayed the video, pausing at the frame where Marcus was bent over the hood, his hand on the engine. The sunlight caught the side of his face, calm and focused. Something about that look tugged at her. It reminded her of her father, Arthur Davenport, who used to listen to engines the same way. She remembered being a girl in his workshop, the smell of motor oil and cedar, her father's laugh echoing under the rafters. "Engines got rhythm, Chloe," he'd say, tapping the side of a car. "You gotta listen before you can fix." Her throat tightened. She hadn't thought about that in years. Not since the accident. Outside her window, the waves murmured against the shore, steady and patient, like an old heart that refused to stop beating. She closed the video and set the phone face down. The last words he'd said before walking away replayed in her mind, soft but unshakable. "You don't owe me anything. The car just needed someone to listen." For the first time in a long while, Chloe realized she hadn't really listened to anyone, or anything, in years. The video didn't feel real at first. It was just a noise that kept following Chloe around. The little ping from her phone, the quick gasp from a stranger at the valet stand, a cashier who recognized her and tried not to smirk. By dusk, the numbers swelled like a tide. A few thousand views, then tens of thousands, then the word viral floating like an accusation over her evening. She turned the sound off and watched the captions fly by. Some were kind, most weren't. People loved a rich girl getting humbled on camera. It was a story that told itself without patience for context, and the internet had never been famous for patience. She poured another glass of wine and tried not to stare at the frozen frame where Marcus's hand rested on the engine like he was listening for a secret. Something about that posture made the room feel too quiet. Her group chat roared to life. Savannah sent a string of laughing emojis and a link to an opinion blog treating the scene like a sports highlight. Another friend wrote, "At least he was hot," followed by a winky face Chloe didn't know how to answer. Someone asked if she'd really meant to bet the guy or if she'd been joking. She typed, deleted, typed again. In the end, she wrote, "It was playful. He got lucky," and stared at the lie sitting there, smug and small. When they asked if she'd pay him double now, she sent a selfie with a shrug and wrote, "Of course. I always pay my debts." But she remembered how he'd refused the money without even looking at it, like he was protecting something more delicate than pride. Outside, the ocean thumped softly beyond the glass like a giant heartbeat. She set the phone down long enough to hear it, long enough to feel the apartment's quiet open up like an old wound. Her father's workbench lived in the room beside the kitchen, a small shrine she'd been meaning to pack away for 2 years and never could. His tools hung in careful lines. His leather stool was tucked in precisely the same spot she'd left it the day after the funeral. A cigar box on the shelf held the last thing he'd written to her, notes for a design he'd called The Project. He'd used the word the way some people said, promise. She slid open the box, touched the pages, and told herself the ache would pass if she just breathed slower. It didn't. She didn't notice the email at first. It waited in her inbox with the bland politeness of a scheduled message, subject line tidy and mercenary. Finalization request, Arthur Davenport posthumous collection. She skimmed it, then read it again more slowly. Corporate language. Friendly condolences in the second paragraph. A reminder that her signature would unlock a commemorative line. Limited edition. The legacy her father deserved. She imagined the car brand plastering his name across a glossy campaign and felt something cold slide under her ribs. In the video on her phone, Marcus bent over the Porsche and the light curved around him the way it used to curve around her father when he was listening to a false knock. Engines got rhythm, he'd say. Listen first. Fix second. She closed the laptop gently, like the act could delay a decision. It couldn't. Across town, the garage lights hummed, making a soft silver ring on the concrete beneath them. Marcus leaned his forearms on the wooden counter and stared at the receipts as if they might rearrange themselves into good news. Business had been slow all month. Summer meant people let small problems slide, brakes just a little spongy, belts a little loud. He didn't blame them. He had once let a small problem slide and a good man paid for it. He shook the thought off, went to the back, washed his hands, and came back with a paper cup of coffee, so weak you could see the bottom. It was a comfort he'd learned to love, the ritual of it. A day ending, a job done, a quiet room. He kept the radio low, the same Motown station he'd listened to as a boy with his grandfather, buzzed in and out like a memory trying to find the right station. A knock sounded on the half-open bay door. Mrs. Ortega, who lived 2 blocks over and drove a minivan that coughed in the mornings, stood there cradling a pie tin with a dish towel over it. Marcus Mijo, she said, stepping inside and looking around as if secrets might be hiding on the floor. You're famous. I'm tired, he said and smiled to take the sting out of it. She put the tin on the counter and patted his cheek with a mother's audacity. You fixed that lady's fancy car in front of the whole world. And you didn't take her money. People notice that. Some will love you for it. Some will hate you for it. You keep being yourself. She pushed the pie toward him. Fresh peach. Take a slice. It's the season for sweetness. He laughed, a real sound that felt good all the way down. Thank you, Mrs. O. Also, she added, lowering her voice, there's a news van up the block pretending to get gas. She gave a small tsk. I parked my cousin in the spot they wanted. They'll live. He walked her to the door and watched the twilight gather over the street, soft as breath. Fame wasn't the right word for what the video was doing to his life, but it was the word everyone used. He thought about how the woman's face had fallen when the engine turned over, how pride and loss can sit so close together in a person's eyes that you can't tell where one ends and the other begins. He didn't like the laughter in the crowd behind her. He didn't like laughter used as a blade. When the phone on the counter buzzed again, he let it go. Then it buzzed a second time, and he checked the screen. Tyrone, who sometimes helped him on Saturdays, had sent a link to the clip with a string of bro messages that made him grin despite himself. Underneath was a text from an unknown number. He hesitated, then opened it. Thank you for today. I said something I shouldn't have. CD, no other words. No demand, no defense, no apology dressed up in logic, just that bare sentence standing on its own feet. He stared at it longer than he meant to, then typed back. You're welcome. Car's running smooth. If it acts up again, bring it by. He set the phone down, suddenly aware of how tired his bones felt. The day's heat had finally let go of the asphalt. A mild breeze moved through the bay, shifting the hanging wrenches till they made a faint, pleasant clink. He turned off the radio, listened to the big quiet, and heard the city settling like an old man easing into a chair. It reminded him of his grandfather. It always did. Back at the apartment, Chloe stared at the message she'd sent and wondered why it felt so hard to hit send on 3 ordinary sentences. Pride had a way of complicating the simplest tasks, and she'd fed hers like a house pet for years. She walked into the spare room and sat on her father's stool without meaning to, her knees bumping the scar in the wood where he'd once dropped a wrench, and laughed at himself. Grace, he'd told her, handing the wrench back to gravity like it was a dance partner. You can't force grace. You make room for it. She turned the email back on and read it again, the cursor blinking near the signature line like a metronome counting down to a bad song. She closed it. She wasn't ready. Her phone rattled in the quiet, and she flinched, half expecting another stranger's opinion. Instead, it was a notification from a car forum she joined years ago under a fake name to follow her father's work. Someone had posted a slowed-down clip of Marcus fixing the Porsche, explaining in patient strokes what he'd done. Grounding, contact. The kind of fix that looks like luck to people who don't know where to listen. The comments were different there. Gentler, more technical, less interested in humiliation than in craft. She read them until her eyes softened, and the world stopped feeling like a jury with no judge. When she finally slid the window open to let more of the ocean in, the night air smelled like damp rope and lemon from someone's laundry. She wanted to call someone and didn't know who. She wanted to tell someone that the thing that bothered her wasn't being wrong in public. It was seeing a stranger doing the same intimate thing her father used to do and realizing she'd mocked it. That struck something deeper than embarrassment, something like grief waking up from a long nap and stretching its arms. On the other side of town, Marcus turned off the lights and stood for a moment in the dark, letting his eyes adjust to the silver square of moon that had spilled onto the floor. He placed his hand on the fender of a Buick that had seen better years and felt the cool metal. Engines had taught him how to pay attention. He wished people were easier. He thought of the woman at the resort, how her voice had been sharp but not cruel, not really, not in the way that leaves a scar you can't hide. He thought of the way she'd looked at the car when it came alive, like someone hearing a familiar song from another room. He could respect that, even if he didn't understand what it cost her. By midnight, the clip had crossed 1 million views. Chloe's PR person texted to ask if she wanted to issue a statement. She typed no without thinking, then put the phone face down again, like maybe shutting its eyes would give hers a rest. She washed her wine glass, dried it, put it in the cabinet in the same spot her father always used, and told herself that tomorrow she'd drive to the little garage by the shore for no good reason, except one she didn't have words for yet. For tonight, she sat on the edge of the workbench stool, rested her palms on the old wood where her father's hands had worn the finish smooth, and listened to the hush between waves the way you listen to an engine you loved, not for trouble, but for rhythm. Morning sunlight crept through the sheer curtains of Chloe's apartment, touching the glass desk where her laptop still sat open from the night before. She hadn't slept much. The ocean had roared louder than usual, or maybe it just felt that way because her thoughts refused to quiet. She moved to the kitchen barefoot, started the espresso machine, and watched the crema swirl in her cup. The phone buzzed again. More notifications, more strangers dissecting her life. She scrolled past them until she hit an email from a name she hadn't seen in years. Hallie Motors Legal Affairs. The subject line read, Posthumous Design Authorization, Davenport Collection. She opened it slowly, eyes scanning the familiar company logo, the signature at the bottom from a man named Victor Hall. He'd been at her father's memorial, tall and impeccably polite, the kind of executive who smelled like expensive leather and smiled like a photograph. The email was brief, perfunctory, something about rights, brand legacy, and limited edition releases in her father's honor. There was even a press mock-up of a gold plaque with the words, Arthur Davenport, Vision Lives On. It was supposed to feel flattering. It didn't. She stared at the digital signature line blinking near the end of the document, the way a heartbeat might pulse on a hospital monitor. All she had to do was click once. Instead, she closed the laptop and reached for her father's old photo frame on the shelf above the coffee machine. It was the picture taken the day Hallie Motors opened their new testing facility. Arthur smiling with his team of engineers, sun glare streaking across the metal prototype behind them. He looked younger than she remembered, sleeves rolled up, that mix of charm and stubbornness alive in his grin. Behind him, half cropped by the frame, stood a man with darker skin and an easy posture, head bent slightly as if listening to something no one else could hear. She'd never noticed him before. Her heart gave a faint, confused skip. She leaned closer. The resolution was poor, but the face tugged at her memory like a thread. Calm eyes, same build, same quiet focus. He looked so much like Marcus Reed that she felt her stomach tighten. It couldn't be. She dug through an old box of her father's awards and trade magazines. There it was, an article titled The Men Behind the Machine. The byline photo showed her father again, and standing beside him, smiling shyly at the camera, was a younger Marcus Reed. The caption read, "Lid Mechanical Engineer, Halley Motors R&D Division." She sat back hard, the air leaving her chest all at once. The man who'd fixed her car wasn't just some beachside mechanic. He'd been part of her father's world, part of that project. The project that ended the day her father's car veered off a test track and exploded into the guardrail. The one Halley Motors had ruled driver error. Her phone buzzed again, snapping her out of the fog. Savannah's name appeared. "Girl, you're trending again," the voice on the line squealed. "They made a remix of your little car fiasco. I swear TikTok is undefeated." Chloe rubbed her forehead. "Savannah, please, not now." "Oh, come on, you should see it. They've turned him into some kind of folk hero. Everyone loves a blue-collar miracle worker. It's like the internet's adopted him." "Good for him," Chloe said quietly. Savannah hesitated. "You okay? You sound weird." "I'm fine. Just tired." She hung up before her friend could dig further. She wasn't fine. Every bone in her body buzzed with disbelief and guilt. She poured another coffee and replayed the video one last time, pausing at the frame where Marcus's hands hovered over the engine. His movements weren't improvisation. They were muscle memory. He'd known that car. He'd built it. A sudden image flooded back. Her father, sitting in his office late at night, sketching designs on napkins and muttering to himself. She'd peek in to say goodnight. He'd smile, tired but proud, and tap the paper. "This one will change everything, Chloe. We're calling it Project Halo. But the brilliance behind it isn't mine. It's that young engineer Marcus. You should meet him someday." She never did. Not until the parking lot 3 years after her father's death. The espresso turned bitter on her tongue. She left the cup half full and pulled out her phone, scrolling until she found the old press release about the crash. The official statement said the cause was a mechanical malfunction due to unforeseen driver response. That was corporate talk for your father pressed the wrong pedal. But what if it wasn't? What if Marcus knew more than anyone else dared to say? The question clawed at her. Within minutes, she was in the elevator, wearing jeans and a sweatshirt, her hair tied back carelessly. The garage by the beach was quiet when she arrived, the late morning sun glaring off the sign, Reed Auto Works. The air smelled like oil and sea salt, like her father's workshop. She hesitated before stepping inside. Marcus was bent over an old Buick, a rag thrown over his shoulder, humming softly to himself. When he looked up, recognition flickered across his face. Surprise, but not shock. "Morning," he said, straightening. "Porsche giving you trouble again?" "Something like that," she said. Her voice came out thinner than she expected. He wiped his hands on the rag. "You didn't have to drive all the way here. Could have called. I needed to ask you something." She gestured toward the photo tacked to the bulletin board behind him, the same image she'd seen in her apartment. "That picture. You were on my father's team, weren't you?" For a heartbeat, neither of them moved. Then he exhaled slowly. "Yes, ma'am, I was. Why didn't you say anything?" He studied her face carefully before answering. "You didn't seem like you wanted a history lesson. Most people don't." Her chest tightened. "You worked with him on Project Halo?" A faint nod. "I did. He was a good man. The best I ever worked for." The garage filled with the quiet hum of a fan and the distant crash of waves outside. She stepped closer, her throat dry. "Then maybe you can tell me something the company never did. Why did that car fail?" He looked away, jaw tight. "That's not a story they want told." "I'm not asking them. I'm asking you." He leaned against the workbench, eyes fixed on the floor. "There was a problem with the braking system. I warned the board about it. Your father backed me up. But they pushed a test early. Deadlines. Investors. You know how it goes." His voice softened. "When the car went off track, they said it was his fault. I knew better, but saying that out loud would have buried both of us." Her heart thudded painfully. "You let them blame him." "I was under a non-disclosure agreement," he said quietly. "Speaking would have cost me my career, maybe more. I thought I could live with that choice. Turns out I couldn't." She turned away, staring at the floor-to-ceiling window where sunlight streaked through dust motes. Her father's laughter echoed in her memory, the way he'd tap her shoulder and say, "Courage means listening to your gut when everyone else calls it noise." She pressed a hand to her chest. "He trusted you," she whispered. "I know," Marcus said. "And I failed him." The words hung between them like smoke. She could feel anger trying to rise, but underneath it was something heavier, recognition. They were both carrying the same ghost, just from different sides of the same wreck. Outside, the sound of a car horn startled them. A delivery truck rumbled past, leaving the scent of diesel and hot pavement. Marcus cleared his throat. Look, if you came here for closure, I don't have much to give. The truth doesn't change what happened. No, she said, her voice steadier now, but it changes what I thought happened. He nodded once, slow and solemn. That's something. She glanced around the garage one last time. Every tool was organized, every bench wiped clean, the kind of order that came from a man who'd lost too much to chaos. On the far wall hung a framed certificate, Arthur Davenport Memorial Engineering Award, 2019. Her eyes stung. You won this? He hesitated. It was posthumous recognition for him. I just keep it here to remind me what integrity costs. Chloe swallowed hard. My father used to say an engine never lies. Guess he taught you that too. Marcus's gaze softened. He did, and he meant people, not machines. She left the garage with the words trailing her like the scent of motor oil and truth. The sunlight outside felt sharper now, less forgiving. She didn't look back until she reached her car. Through the window, she could see Marcus return to his workbench, the same calm posture as before. For a fleeting second, she understood the quiet dignity her father must have seen in him. As she started the Porsche, the engine hummed to life with the same rhythm it had on the day he fixed it. But now the sound felt different, like a message, faint but certain, from two men who'd both tried to tell her the same thing in their own way. Some problems aren't mechanical at all. They're moral. And fixing them takes more than skill. It takes listening. The hum of the garage lingered long after Chloe's car disappeared down the road. Marcus stood by the open bay door, watching the sunlight glint off her rearview mirror until it vanished behind the curve. The quiet that followed wasn't peace. It was the kind that came before an old memory started knocking again. He pulled the rag from his shoulder, wiped his hands even though they were already clean, and told himself to get back to work. But instead, he sat down on the stool beside the workbench and stared at the wall of tools that hung in perfect order. Every wrench had a place, every socket labeled by size. He'd learned that habit from his grandfather Luther, a man who believed chaos was an insult to craftsmanship. The clock on the wall clicked softly, a sound that never failed to drag him back to Detroit, 1997. Back then, the air was thicker, smelled of gasoline, rain, and rust. He was 15, small for his age, but strong enough to hoist a carburetor with both hands. Luther's garage sat on the corner of 8 Mile and Dresden, its sign hand-painted, letters fading but proud, Cole & Sons Auto Repair. There were no sons left to work the shop, just Marcus and his grandfather. His father had gone chasing something called better prospects and never sent an address. Luther was the kind of man who spoke little and listened a lot. He said engines were like people. They told you exactly what they needed if you stopped talking long enough to hear them. The boy had laughed the first time he heard it, but Luther just smiled and lifted his chin toward a rattling Ford on the lift. Go on, he'd said. Tell me what she's saying. Marcus had leaned in, straining to hear past the noise, and whispered, She sounds tired. That's right, Luther had said. She's tired. You can hear it in the rhythm. Too fast where it should be smooth, like a heart under pressure. He tapped the side of the engine with his knuckle. The good mechanics, they don't fix metal, they fix heartbeats. Even now, the memory of that line could stop Marcus cold. It wasn't about engines anymore. It was about people. And maybe that's why seeing Chloe earlier had stirred something old in him, something that felt too much like regret. She had her father's eyes. Same shade, same way they searched for truth even when it hurt to look. Thinking too loud again? The voice pulled him back. He looked up to see Miss June standing at the doorway, arms crossed, her floral scarf catching the breeze. She was in her 60s, but moved with the steady grace of someone who'd lived 3 lives already. Once a NASA engineer, now the unofficial mother of the neighborhood, she ran a cafe next door that smelled like cinnamon and diesel fuel. Afternoon, Miss June, he said with a tired smile. You bring coffee, or is this an intervention? She held up a paper cup. Both. She passed it to him and glanced around the shop. You keep this place cleaner than a surgery room. What are you running from today? He chuckled softly. Just ghosts. Mm-hmm. She studied him over the rim of her glasses. That woman from the beach came back, didn't she? Yeah, he admitted. She found out I worked with her father. Miss June sighed. Lord have mercy. That explains the look on your face. You always did carry your guilt like it was a tool you needed. Marcus set the cup down. Her dad was a good man. He believed in me when no one else did. When he died, I kept my mouth shut. Thought I was protecting what he built. Turns out I was just protecting the people who ruined him. June stepped closer, her hand gentle on his shoulder. You can't rewrite the past, baby. All you can do is fix what's in front of you. And sometimes that means helping the ones left behind. He nodded, though the words didn't lift the heaviness sitting in his chest. She deserves the truth. She does, June agreed, but she also deserves time. That kind of pain's like an open hood. You don't slam it shut until you're sure the problem's found. She tilted her head toward the radio. Play something old, your granddaddy's records. Let the sound clean the air a bit. Marcus smiled at the thought. He crossed the garage to an old turntable in the corner and placed a record on it. The Temptations, one of Luther's favorites. The static before the first note filled the space like a breath. When the music started, he could almost see his grandfather again. Hands blackened with grease, head bobbing to the beat, a wrench keeping rhythm against his thigh. The song carried him straight into another memory, one he hadn't touched in years. The day Luther had let him rebuild his first engine. It was an old Chevy block, rusted to hell. Marcus had spent weeks disassembling, cleaning, replacing. He'd been certain it would fail. But when he turned the key, the engine rumbled to life so smooth that Luther's eyes had filled with tears. That sound, boy, he'd said, voice breaking just a little. That's what forgiveness sounds like. The knock at the door came softly this time, pulling him from the haze. Tyrone, his weekend helper, poked his head in. Boss, someone dropped this off. He handed over an envelope with the Halley Motors logo. Guy in a suit said it was personal. Marcus turned it over in his hand, dread settling like dust. Inside was a letter, typed in cold, a legal reminder of his non-disclosure agreement, a subtle threat about defamatory implications if he discussed company operations or personnel. At the bottom, Victor Hall's name again, bold and immaculate. He folded it neatly and set it on the counter without a word. Miss June's eyes darkened. They still watching you after all these years? Guess they never stopped. He gave a dry laugh. They must have heard about the video. You gonna let them scare you? He looked at her, the weight of 2 decades in his gaze. I already did once. I'm not sure I can do it again. She smiled sadly, her hand brushing his cheek like a mother might. Then don't. But be smart about it. Truth's a hard road. It don't come with guardrails. After she left, he stayed there for a long time, the letter glowing white under the hanging bulb. Outside, the sea wind pushed against the open door, carrying the scent of salt and coffee and something faintly metallic. He walked to the edge of the bay, looked out toward the horizon and whispered, Granddad, I'm listening. The faint echo of waves was the only answer, but it was enough. Back in her apartment, Chloe stood in her father's old workshop space, tracing the outlines of tools she hadn't touched in years. There was dust on everything, but not neglect, more like reverence. She lifted one of the old design sketches from the corkboard and turned it toward the light. At the corner, in neat block letters, 2 signatures shared the page, Arthur Davenport and Marcus Reed. She read them again and again until the names blurred. The smell of motor oil and paper filled her nose, and for the first time since his death, she didn't feel anger. She felt absence, a hollow kind that demanded to be filled with understanding. The memory came uninvited. She was 9, sitting on a stool too high for her feet to reach the ground. Her father had been teaching her how to change a spark plug, patient, amused by her clumsy fingers. There's music in everything mechanical, he'd said. You just have to find the right tempo. When she dropped the wrench, he'd laughed and ruffled her hair. That's all right, kiddo. Even a wrong note can teach you the rhythm. Now, all these years later, the rhythm she heard was a heartbeat she didn't recognize. Steady, insistent, coming from that same Porsche in the garage downstairs. She knew she'd be driving it again soon, but this time not to show off or escape. This time, She needed to go back to the man who once listened to machines like prayers. Because if he'd worked beside her father, he might be the last person alive who could tell her what truly happened that day on the track. And maybe, just maybe, he was the only one who could help her forgive herself for everything she hadn't listened to until now. By the time Chloe pulled up to read AutoWorks again, the afternoon sun had turned the air into something you could almost chew. The smell of oil and warm metal drifted out from the open bay, blending with salt from the ocean just across the street. The same hand-painted sign hung above the door, but this time it didn't feel like some shabby corner shop. It felt like a threshold she had to cross. She sat in her Porsche for a long minute, fingers tight on the steering wheel, until she saw him through the wide doorway. Marcus bent over an engine, a smudge of grease on his cheek, humming under his breath. He looked up as if he had felt her there. "Car's fine, I hope." "It's acting up again," she lied, stepping out of the car. She couldn't even tell why she said it. The engine had been running perfectly. She just needed a reason to see him that didn't sound like guilt. Marcus raised an eyebrow. "That right? Funny, that model doesn't act up much twice in the same week." She shrugged, avoiding his eyes. "Maybe I'm just unlucky." He wiped his hands on a rag, half smiling. "Or maybe you're curious." Her throat tightened. "Curious about what?" "About things your company never told you," he said, tone gentle but sure. "You found that picture." She blinked. "How did you?" "Everyone who walks in here looks at it," he said. "Most of them don't recognize anyone in it. You did." She followed his gaze to the photo pinned above the workbench. Her father's grin, the flash of sunlight, the younger version of Marcus standing just off center. Her voice came out small. "You worked with him for how long?" "Almost 8 years," he said. "Longer if you count the nights we spent arguing about ideas no one would fund." He turned back to the table, aligning his wrenches in a perfect row. He was stubborn, brilliant, drove people crazy, but he had a way of seeing the beauty inside a machine before it existed. "He was like that at home too," she said quietly. "He used to tell me engines were like people. If you learn their language, you'll never get stranded." Marcus smiled faintly. "That sounds like him." He looked at her then, not as the woman from the video, not as the stranger who'd mocked him, but as Arthur Davenport's daughter. "He talked about you a lot." Chloe's breath caught. "He did?" "He kept a picture of you on his desk. Said his best work wasn't in steel or aluminum, it was raising a girl who believed in herself." Marcus hesitated. "He'd brag about your company. Told everyone you were going to build something honest, not like the folks upstairs." The words hit her harder than she expected. She felt the sting behind her eyes, blinked it away, and glanced around the garage to hide it. Her gaze landed on a framed certificate near the window. "Arthur Davenport Memorial Engineering Award 2019. "You won that?" she asked. Marcus shook his head. "They handed it to me after he passed. I don't call that winning." She stepped closer. The air between them hummed with unspoken things, loss, admiration, regret. "You know," she said, "when I was little, I used to fall asleep in his shop to the sound of engines idling. After he died, I couldn't stand that sound anymore." He leaned against the counter, arms folded loosely. "Sometimes the things that hurt us most are the ones trying to bring us back." The doorbell above the bay clanged, breaking the spell. Tyrone, the young man who helped on weekends, walked in with a box of parts. "Hey, boss, got the filters you ordered." "Oh, hi, ma'am." Chloe nodded politely. "Hi." Tyrone grinned. "You're that lady, huh? The one from the beach video. My grandma's been replaying that thing like it's Sunday service." "Tyrone," Marcus warned. The kid raised his hands. "What? I'm just saying, man went viral. You should see the comments. People calling him the engine whisperer now." Marcus groaned, but Chloe couldn't help smiling. "Engine whisperer," she repeated. "That actually fits." After Tyrone left, she turned serious again. "Marcus, I need to know what really happened the day of my father's crash. You said there was a problem with the brakes. Was it ever fixed?" He took a long breath. "Fixed, yes. Admitted, no. The executives buried it. Claimed he ignored safety protocol." "And you didn't fight them?" "I tried. Got told to shut up or lose my pension. I had a mother in the hospital back then, bills stacking up. I made a choice I've regretted every day since." Chloe stared at him, torn between anger and understanding. "You could have told me. All these years, you could have." I didn't think you'd believe me, he said softly. And maybe I didn't deserve to ask you to. Her voice broke on the next words. He died thinking the world thought he was careless. Do you have any idea what that did to me? He nodded, eyes glinting with something like pain. I do, because I live with what it did to me. They stood there in silence, the air thick with memory. The fan hummed overhead, and through the open door came the faint rhythm of waves breaking against the pier. Finally, Chloe spoke again, quieter. You kept that photo all these years. He looked up. Reminds me of the only man who ever taught me what integrity meant. She swallowed hard, then glanced down at her hands. And what about me? What do I remind you of? Marcus hesitated, then smiled, a tired, kind smile. Of him, only louder. Something loosened in her chest, a knot she hadn't known was there. She exhaled slowly. Maybe we both got a few things to fix. He nodded. Maybe so. She moved toward the open door, sunlight cutting a soft outline around her. Before leaving, she turned back. If you ever decide to tell the world what really happened, I'll stand with you. His eyes held hers for a long moment. Be careful with that kind of promise, Chloe. Truth doesn't just set you free. It burns everything that won't stand in its light. I'm not afraid of light, she said, though her voice trembled a little. He watched her go, the soft roar of the Porsche fading into the sound of seagulls. For the first time in years, he let himself hope that maybe the past wasn't finished talking, and maybe, just maybe, he'd found someone willing to listen. That night, as the garage settled into darkness, he stayed late, staring at the old blueprints pinned to the wall, the last ones he and Arthur had drawn together. He traced the ink lines with a fingertip until the paper blurred. Outside, the ocean murmured in its endless rhythm, the same rhythm that lived in every machine he ever loved, the same one his grandfather had taught him to hear. Somewhere out there, the world was watching a video that made him look like a miracle worker. But standing in that quiet shop, he knew better. He was just a man trying to make peace with an unfinished song. The next few days crawled by like a slow song that wouldn't end. Chloe tried to bury herself in work, board meetings, product launches, phone calls that never seemed to say anything real. But the noise of it all couldn't drown out the echo of Marcus's words. The truth doesn't change what happened. They looped in her head like a broken record. Each time she heard them, the guilt pressed heavier. She had lived years believing her father had made a mistake, a small moment of human error that took his life. But if Marcus was right, that mistake had a name, and it belonged to people still walking free. Late Thursday evening, she sat in her office staring at the framed portrait of her father hanging above the bookshelf. His smile was calm, steady, the kind of confidence that came from believing the world could be better if you worked hard enough. You were wrong about that, she whispered. Hard work doesn't fix greed. The city lights outside her window shimmered like distant fires. She closed her laptop, grabbed her keys, and left before she could talk herself out of what she was about to do. The headquarters of Halley Motors sat on the edge of downtown, a sleek glass building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate anyone who stepped inside. At the front desk, the receptionist gave her a polished smile. Miss Davenport, Mr. Hall is expecting you. Victor Hall's office was on the top floor, behind doors so heavy they might as well have been a vault. He stood when she entered, that familiar politician's smile already in place. Chloe, he said warmly, extending a hand she didn't take. It's been too long. Not long enough, she said. You sent me an email about my father's collection. I'm here to talk about something else. He gestured for her to sit. Of course, anything you need. She didn't sit. I want to know the real cause of the crash. I want every report, every test result, every memo you kept buried. His expression didn't change, but his shoulders stiffened just enough for her to see it. I'm not sure I understand what you're implying. I think you do. She leaned forward on the desk. I spoke to Marcus Reed. The air in the room shifted. Victor's jaw tightened. Ah, Mr. Reed, I see. He told me about the brake issue, the warnings, the cover-up. You let the world believe my father made a mistake when it was your company's fault. Victor clasped his hands together like a man trying to hold on to civility. Your father was a visionary, but he took risks. He pushed limits. We respected that, but it came at a cost. What happened was tragic, but accidents. Don't you dare call it an accident, she snapped. He trusted you. He trusted this company. Victor's smile vanished. Be careful, Chloe. You're speaking from grief, not reason. And Mr. Reed, well, he's a bitter man. He left under complicated circumstances. He was forced out because he told the truth, she shot back, and you know it. He stood, adjusting his cufflinks with slow precision. You're emotional, I understand, but dredging up old wounds doesn't help anyone. You have a company to run. You signed the authorization for the Davenport collection and will ensure your father's legacy is honored properly. Let's keep history clean. She stared at him in disbelief. You mean profitable? Clean, he repeated. The world doesn't need to know every ugly detail. You're too smart to ruin both your name and ours over something that can't be changed. The room felt suddenly colder. She looked at him, this man her father had once called a friend, and realized that some people aged without ever growing up. My father died trying to protect people like you from yourselves, she said. I won't make the same mistake. When she turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice smooth as polished marble. Be careful, Chloe. Nostalgia can cloud judgment. And remember, Mr. Reed is still bound by a non-disclosure agreement. If he talks, he loses everything. She didn't answer. The elevator doors closed on his smile. Driving back along the coastal highway, she could feel the anger trembling in her hands. The Porsche's headlights cut through the dark, reflecting on the water beside her like streaks of glass. For years, she had built her empire on the idea of legacy, of protecting her father's name. Now she realized she'd been protecting the very lie that had killed him. She pulled into the parking lot of Reed Auto Works without planning to. The garage was lit from within, warm light spilling onto the pavement. Marcus was alone, sitting at his workbench with a notebook open, pencil tapping against the margin. He looked up when she walked in. You shouldn't be here this late, he said softly. People will start talking. Let them. She closed the door behind her. I went to see Victor Hall, he sighed. I figured you might. He confirmed everything you said, not in words, but in how fast he tried to bury it again. She set her purse on the counter and leaned against it. He said if you talk, they'll take everything from you. Marcus smiled faintly. They already did. She felt something twist in her chest. You could still lose your shop. I've lost bigger things, he said. Jobs, friends, a name I used to be proud of. What's left now is peace, and I won't trade that for silence anymore. She took a deep breath. Then we tell them, together. He looked at her, studying her face for a long moment, as if trying to decide whether she understood what that meant. It won't be easy. They'll smear you, drag your company through the mud, call you ungrateful, unstable. They'll call me worse. I don't care, she said. I just want my father's truth back. For the first time since she'd known him, he looked unsure. Why does it matter so much now? Because I spent years building a business on the same values they sold me, polish over principle, image over honesty. I told myself it was what he would have wanted, but that man in your photo, he wanted better from me. She paused, her voice trembling. He believed in me, and I let him down. Marcus's eyes softened. He reached for the wrench on the table, turning it slowly in his hand, like a rosary for mechanics. You're your father's daughter, you know. He once told me courage doesn't mean doing the right thing when it's safe. It means doing it when you've got everything to lose. She felt the tears come, quiet but unstoppable. Then help me. He nodded once. All right, but we do this on our terms, carefully, no leaks till we have proof. Proof? He walked to a locked cabinet, pulled out a weathered binder, and laid it on the workbench. Inside were blueprints, memos, test reports, evidence he'd kept hidden since the day he was fired. The top page bore her father's initials. This, he said, is what they don't want anyone to see. She touched the edge of the paper with trembling fingers. You kept all this? I promised him I'd finish what we started, he said. Guess it's about time I made good on it. They stood side by side, the hum of the fluorescent lights filling the silence. The night outside was deep and still. For a moment, it almost felt like Arthur Davenport was there with them, nodding in quiet approval. Then Marcus closed the binder. Tomorrow we'll figure out how to bring this to light. Tonight you go home. Get some sleep. You're going to need it. She wanted to argue, but exhaustion won. All right, she said softly, but promise me one thing. What's that? When this is over, don't disappear again. He smiled, weary but warm. I'll try not to. As she left the garage, Chloe glanced back through the window. Marcus stood at his workbench, the old binder open under the glow of a single lamp. The light caught the side of his face, the same calm focus she'd seen that first day on the beach. And for the first time since her father's death, she felt something close to peace, fragile but real. The truth was coming, and this time she wasn't afraid to face it. The rain started just before dawn, a steady whisper against the windows of Chloe's apartment. She sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling beside the open binder Marcus had given her. The papers were old, yellowed in the corners, the ink faded in places but still legible. Blueprints, emails, mechanical schematics stamped with Halley Motors' logo. Some of them bore her father's handwriting in the margins. Neat, firm, confident. She traced the pen strokes with her fingertip, her throat tightening when she saw a single line written near the bottom of a test report. If this design goes public, they'll bury us both. She had read those words 5 times already, but the weight of them didn't get any lighter. Her father had known what would happen. He tried to warn Marcus, and he died anyway. A soft knock broke the silence. Chloe turned to find her assistant, Amy, standing in the doorway, holding a tablet. "Morning," Amy said cautiously. "You might want to see this." The video was playing on a news site, grainy footage from years ago, a car spinning off a test track, flames blooming against a gray sky. The headline read, "New questions emerge about the Davenport crash." Someone had leaked the story. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs. Where did this come from? "Anonymous source," Amy said. "But it's everywhere. They're saying Marcus Reed sent it." Chloe's chair scraped the tile as she stood. "He wouldn't do that without telling me." Amy hesitated. "They're tearing him apart online. Halley Motors issued a statement this morning calling him a disgruntled ex-employee fabricating conspiracy theories for attention." Chloe felt the world tilt slightly under her feet. "Get my car." By the time she reached the garage, Marcus was pacing the floor, a crumpled newspaper in his hand. The radio on the counter blared snippets of talk shows dissecting the scandal. "They found us faster than I expected," he said, voice low and calm, but she could see the tension in his jaw. "You didn't leak it?" He shook his head. "No, someone inside the company must have caught wind of what we were planning. They're using it to spin the narrative before we do." Chloe's phone buzzed again. It was Victor Hall. She declined the call. "They're blaming you." He smiled without humor. "Wouldn't be the first time." She set her purse down hard on the counter. "We can't let them own the story. We go public, press conference, evidence, everything." Marcus looked at her. "You sure about that? Once this starts, there's no going back. They'll dig through every corner of your life trying to make you the villain." "Let them try," she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right, but we do it smart. We show them the truth, not the anger. That's what your father would have done." She felt a lump rise in her throat. "He'd be proud of you, you know." "I don't know about that," Marcus said quietly, "but maybe this time I can stop running from what I should have done years ago." They spent the next hour gathering everything: schematics, test results, internal memos. Marcus made copies of the documents, scanning each page with steady hands while Chloe drafted a statement. Her fingers shook over the keyboard. The last line she wrote was simple: "My father's death was not an accident. It was a cover-up, and today we end the silence." When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like glass. A reporter was already waiting by the curb, microphone in hand, camera light blinking red. "Mr. Reed, do you have any comment about the allegations from Halley Motors?" Marcus's face hardened. "Not yet," he said, guiding Chloe toward her car. "But they'll hear from us soon enough." At the studio downtown, Chloe's public relations manager, Valerie, met them at the door. She looked pale, nervous. "Are you sure about this, Chloe? You're risking your entire brand." Chloe handed her the flash drive. "My brand is built on integrity. If that dies, the rest doesn't matter." Valerie sighed and nodded. "The live broadcast starts in 20 minutes. The studio lights were hot, blinding. Chloe stood behind the podium, heart hammering as the countdown echoed through the speakers. Beside her, Marcus adjusted his tie, a borrowed one, slightly crooked, and whispered, "You're shaking." "So are you," she whispered back. The red light went on. She looked straight into the camera. My name is Chloe Davenport. 4 years ago, my father, Arthur Davenport, was killed testing a prototype vehicle for Halley Motors. For years, the company called it driver error. They lied. Today, with the help of Marcus Reed, my father's colleague and friend, we're presenting evidence proving the company knew about the defect that caused his death. She paused, breath unsteady. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, and about a man who deserved better than to be silenced. Marcus stepped forward, laying the binder on the podium. These documents are from internal reports. They show that Halley Motors ignored multiple warnings from engineering teams. Arthur tried to delay production. He was overruled. The phones in the control room started lighting up instantly. The producer signaled they were trending live across every major network. Across town, Victor Hall watched from his office, eyes narrowing. "She wants a war," he muttered to his assistant. "Then she'll get one." By evening, the internet was divided into two camps, those who believed Chloe and Marcus, and those who sided with Halley Motors. The company released a new statement calling the documents fabricated and hinting at possible criminal motives. A smear campaign followed within hours. Old photos of Marcus from Detroit, headlines about debts that didn't exist, whispers that Chloe was using her father's name for publicity. When she saw the first article, Chloe felt her stomach drop. "They're trying to destroy you," she said to Marcus. "They're trying to scare me," he corrected. "And scare you, but fear only works if you stop." She wanted to believe him, but as the night wore on and the messages from investors poured in, threats, ultimatums, silence, she realized how much she had already lost. Her company's board demanded a meeting in the morning. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Sometime after midnight, she and Marcus sat in the quiet of the garage again, the old binder between them. The rain had started up once more, gentle against the roof. She looked at him and asked, "Do you ever regret speaking up?" He thought about it for a long time. "Every day, and I'd still do it again." She smiled faintly, exhausted. "You're braver than I am?" He shook his head. "No, just tired of being quiet." Outside, lightning flashed over the horizon, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. Chloe leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. "Tomorrow they'll come after us harder." Marcus looked toward the door, where the storm pressed against the glass. "Then tomorrow we'll stand taller." For a moment neither of them spoke, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of rain on metal. It sounded almost like an engine idling, alive, patient, waiting for something to move. And somewhere deep inside, Chloe understood that the truth, once started, had its own kind of momentum. It didn't stop for fear or for power. It just kept running, no matter who tried to shut it off. The rain started just before dawn, a steady whisper against the windows of Chloe's apartment. She sat at the kitchen table, a half-empty mug of coffee cooling beside the open binder Marcus had given her. The papers were old, yellowed in the corners, the ink faded in places but still legible. Blueprints, emails, mechanical schematics stamped with Halley Motors' logo. Some of them bore her father's handwriting in the margins. Neat, firm, confident. She traced the pen strokes with her fingertip, her throat tightening when she saw a single line written near the bottom of a test report. "If this design goes public, they'll bury us both." She had read those words 5 times already, but the weight of them didn't get any lighter. Her father had known what would happen. He tried to warn Marcus, and he died anyway. A soft knock broke the silence. Chloe turned to find her assistant, Amy, standing in the doorway, holding a tablet. "Morning," Amy said cautiously. "You might want to see this." The video was playing on a news site, grainy footage from years ago, a car spinning off a test track, flames blooming against a gray sky. The headline read, "New questions emerge about the Davenport crash." Someone had leaked the story. Chloe's heart slammed against her ribs. Where did this come from? "Anonymous source," Amy said. "But it's everywhere. They're saying Marcus Reed sent it." Chloe's chair scraped the tile as she stood. "He wouldn't do that without telling me." Amy hesitated. "They're tearing him apart online. Halley Motors issued a statement this morning calling him a disgruntled ex-employee fabricating conspiracy theories for attention." Chloe felt the world tilt slightly under her feet. "Get my car." By the time she reached the garage, Marcus was pacing the floor, a crumpled newspaper in his hand. The radio on the counter blared snippets of talk shows dissecting the scandal. They found us faster than I expected, he said, voice low and calm, but she could see the tension in his jaw. You didn't leak it? He shook his head. No. Someone inside the company must have caught wind of what we were planning. They're using it to spin the narrative before we do. Chloe's phone buzzed again. It was Victor Hall. She declined the call. They're blaming you. He smiled without humor. Wouldn't be the first time. She set her purse down hard on the counter. We can't let them own the story. We go public. Press conference. Evidence. Everything. Marcus looked at her. You sure about that? Once this starts, there's no going back. They'll dig through every corner of your life trying to make you the villain. Let them try, she said, but the tremor in her voice betrayed her. He studied her for a moment, then nodded. All right, but we do it smart. We show them the truth, if not the anger. That's what your father would have done. She felt a lump rise in her throat. He'd be proud of you, you know. I don't know about that, Marcus said quietly, but maybe this time I can stop running from what I should have done years ago. They spent the next hour gathering everything, schematics, test results, internal memos. Marcus made copies of the documents, scanning each page with steady hands while Chloe drafted a statement. Her fingers shook over the keyboard. The last line she wrote was simple. My father's death was not an accident. It was a cover-up, and today we end the silence. When they stepped outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like glass. A reporter was already waiting by the curb, microphone in hand, camera light blinking red. Mr. Reed, do you have any comment about the allegations from Halley Motors? Marcus's face hardened. Not yet, he said, guiding Chloe toward her car. But they'll hear from us soon enough. At the studio downtown, Chloe's public relations manager, Valerie, met them at the door. She looked pale, nervous. Are you sure about this, Chloe? You're risking your entire brand. Chloe handed her the flash drive. My brand is built on integrity. If that dies, the rest doesn't matter. Valerie sighed and nodded. The live broadcast starts in 20 minutes. The studio lights were hot, blinding. Chloe stood behind the podium, heart hammering as the countdown echoed through the speakers. Beside her, Marcus adjusted his tie, a borrowed one slightly crooked, and whispered, You're shaking. So are you, she whispered back. The red light went on. She looked straight into the camera. My name is Chloe Davenport. 4 years ago, my father, Arthur Davenport, was killed testing a prototype vehicle for Halley Motors. For years, the company called it driver error. They lied. Today, with the help of Marcus Reed, my father's colleague and friend, we're presenting evidence proving the company knew about the defect that caused his death. She paused, breath steady. This isn't about revenge. It's about truth, and about a man who deserved better than to be silenced. Marcus stepped forward, laying the binder on the podium. These documents are from internal reports. They show that Halley Motors ignored multiple warnings from engineering teams. Arthur tried to delay production. He was overruled. The phones in the control room started lighting up instantly. The producer signaled they were trending live across every major network. Across town, Victor Hall watched from his office, eyes narrowing. She wants a war, he muttered to his assistant. Then she'll get one. By evening, the internet was divided into two camps, those who believed Chloe and Marcus, and those who sided with Halley Motors. The company released a new statement calling the documents fabricated and hinting at possible criminal motives. A smear campaign followed within hours, old photos of Marcus from Detroit, headlines about debts that didn't exist, whispers that Chloe was using her father's name for publicity. When she saw the first article, Chloe felt her stomach drop. They're trying to destroy you, she said to Marcus. They're trying to scare me, he corrected, and scare you, but fear only works if you stop. She wanted to believe him, but as the night wore on and the messages from investors poured in, threats, ultimatums, silence, she realized how much she had already lost. Her company's board demanded a meeting in the morning. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Sometime after midnight, she and Marcus sat in the quiet of the garage again, the old binder between them. The rain had started up once more, gentle against the roof. She looked at him and asked, Do you ever regret speaking up? He thought about it for a long time, every day, and I'd still do it again. She smiled faintly, exhausted. You're braver than I am. He shook his head. No, just tired of being quiet. Outside, lightning flashed over the horizon, followed by the distant rumble of thunder. Chloe leaned back against the wall, closing her eyes. Tomorrow they'll come after us harder. Marcus looked toward the door, left where the storm pressed against the glass. Then tomorrow we'll stand taller. For a moment, neither of them spoke, and the only sound was the steady rhythm of rain on metal. It sounded almost like an engine idling, alive, patient, waiting for something to move. And somewhere deep inside, Chloe understood that the truth, once started, had its own kind of momentum. It didn't stop for fear or for power. It just kept running, no matter who tried to shut it off. Morning broke clear and gold after weeks of storms, the kind of light that made even the broken things shine. Marcus stood outside the courthouse, the same binder clutched under his arm, its edges worn smooth from too many nights spent turning its pages. The steps around him buzzed with reporters, microphones angled like bayonets, voices firing questions he had no intention of answering. Chloe stood beside him, calm in a navy suit that made her look more like her father than she realized. A breeze tugged at her hair, but she didn't flinch. They had already weathered worse. Inside, the hearing room smelled of polished wood and tension. Regulators from the Transportation Safety Board filled the front row, their faces unreadable behind glasses and paperwork. Halley Motors lawyers sat across the aisle, all crisp suits and arrogance, pretending confidence while their eyes darted toward the cameras lining the back wall. Victor Hall wasn't there. He'd sent a statement instead, something about cooperation, transparency, and regret for the tragic misunderstanding. But Marcus knew the look of a man hiding behind paperwork. He'd seen it too many times before. The chief investigator, a gray-haired woman named Regina Walsh, adjusted her microphone. We're here to determine whether Halley Motors knowingly suppressed safety data related to the Halo prototype's braking system. Mr. Reed, Miss Davenport, you've submitted evidence to support your claim. Please, walk us through it. Chloe glanced at Marcus before standing. Her voice was steady, her palms open on the table. My father died believing he'd made a mistake. He didn't. The documents you have in front of you show that the defect in the Halo braking system was reported and ignored. My father and Mr. Reed warned the board. They silenced them instead. She gestured toward the binder. The memos are signed by Victor Hall himself. Marcus leaned forward. We're not here for revenge, he said quietly. We're here because people trust what's built under that company's name. And when a company puts money before safety, trust dies faster than steel rusts. For a moment, no one spoke. The room held its breath. Then a low murmur rippled through the audience as the first document appeared on the overhead projector, Arthur Davenport's handwritten note, the one Chloe had memorized line by line. If this design goes public, they'll bury us both. The investigator raised an eyebrow. This is your father's handwriting? Yes, Chloe said. We confirmed it with 2 independent analysts. And this note was found in your possession, Mr. Reed? Marcus nodded. I kept it after the crash. I couldn't bring myself to throw away the only thing that proved what we both knew. The opposing lawyer stood abruptly, voice sharp. Objection. This is speculative. Mr. Reed's dismissal from Halley Motors was disciplinary. He has a financial motive to defame the company. Marcus turned his head slowly, his voice calm but heavy. My only motive is a man who never got to see his daughter grow into the kind of person standing next to me. The lawyer faltered. The judge cleared his throat. Objection overruled. Hours passed as evidence unfolded. Emails, meeting transcripts, test videos. Each piece painted the same picture. A corporation that gambled with safety, then buried the truth beneath layers of bureaucracy. Chloe watched the faces of the board members as the realization set in. Some looked angry, others ashamed. A few refused to look at all. When it was over, the room emptied in slow waves. Reporters rushed outside, phones buzzing, headlines already being born. Marcus stayed behind, staring at the empty chair where Victor should have sat. Chloe touched his shoulder gently. It's done, she said. Not yet, he murmured. Justice moves slow. Truth just got its foot in the door. That afternoon, the statement from the investigation hit every major network. Halley Motors under federal review for safety violations and corporate misconduct. The stock price dropped 11% in an hour. Former engineers came forward, confirming the pattern. And in Detroit, An old mechanic named Luther Cole would have smiled to see his grandson finally keeping his promise. Chloe's office filled with flowers and letters, some from strangers, some from employees she hadn't spoken to in years. "You did the right thing," they wrote. "Your father would be proud." But the message that meant the most came late that night in the form of a voicemail from Victor Hall himself, his voice thin and strained. "You think you've won," he said, "but this will ruin you. Both of you." She deleted it without listening twice. The next morning, she and Marcus stood in the courtyard outside her company headquarters. The press had moved on to newer stories, but a small crowd had gathered, employees, clients, everyday people who had seen themselves in the fight for truth. One of the older engineers, hair gone silver at the temples, stepped forward and shook Marcus's hand. "It's about damn time someone said what we all knew," he said. Marcus smiled. Better late than never. When the man left, Chloe turned to him. "Do you ever think about walking away from all this? Starting over?" He looked toward the horizon where the ocean met the sky, blue melting into brighter blue. "I think about it," he said. "But then I remember the sound an engine makes when it finally runs clean. That's what truth sounds like to me. I'm not ready to turn it off yet." She nodded, understanding more than she could say. The wind picked up, carrying the faint scent of salt and something sweeter, like motor oil and coffee mingled together. It smelled like beginnings. Later that week, a news crew filmed them standing beside the rebuilt Halo prototype, restored under independent supervision. When the key turned, the engine purred to life, flawless, steady, alive. The camera zoomed in on Chloe's face as she smiled through tears. "For 4 years," she said softly, "this machine was a reminder of loss. Today, it's proof that truth doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to listen." Marcus stepped forward, hand resting on the hood. "Your father used to say machines don't fail, people do, but he was wrong about one thing. Sometimes people learn." When the segment aired that night, millions watched. It wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about grace, the kind that doesn't erase pain but turns it into purpose. After the crew left, the courtyard grew quiet again. Chloe leaned against the car, the sunset turning everything gold. "So what now?" she asked. Marcus smiled. "Now we build something better." And for the first time in years, she believed him. The engine idled softly beside them, steady and sure, as if the world itself had learned to breathe again. The first spring morning after the verdict carried a softness the city hadn't felt in months. The rain was gone. The air smelled faintly of salt and wet pavement, and the sunrise spilled gold over the row of garages lining the wharf. A new sign hung above one of them, letters freshly painted in deep navy blue, Reed and Davenport Motors. The ampersand between their names was shaped like an open road. Marcus had drawn it himself. Inside, the space was twice the size of the old shop, with clean white walls, polished concrete floors, and a wide glass front that caught the light. But the heart of it, the workbenches, the smell of oil and sawdust, the radio softly humming old soul tunes, felt exactly the same. Marcus stood by the first restored car they'd finished under their new name, a dark green '68 Mustang that gleamed like a memory brought back to life. His hands rested on the hood, the way a man might rest his palm against a heartbeat. Chloe was on the other side of the room, surrounded by boxes of invoices and design sketches. Her hair was tied up messily, sleeves rolled past her elbows, grease smudged on one wrist. She didn't look like the woman who once stood in glass offices and gave interviews to magazines. She looked free. "You realize," she said without looking up, "we've had 12 people apply for the apprentice program this week?" "Word travels fast," Marcus said. "Everybody loves a redemption story. Or maybe they just love a garage with decent coffee." She smiled and came over to him, holding a clipboard. "We should probably finish that interview with the Chronicle today. They're doing a feature on independent restoration shops that prioritize ethics." He chuckled. "Sounds fancy for what we do." "What we do," she said, lightly tapping the hood beside him, "is fix what's broken. And we don't lie about how it got that way." He met her eyes. "That's fancy enough for me." Outside, the sound of a car pulling into the lot made them both look up. It was Miss June, her bright yellow convertible purring like a cat that knew it was admired. She waved through the windshield before hopping out, scarf fluttering. "Morning, my miracle workers," she called. "Brought muffins and gossip." Chloe laughed. Which first? The gossip, always. June set the basket down and leaned against the counter. You know that Victor Hall resigned last night? Something about health reasons, which is just a polite way of saying his board ran him out before the feds did. Marcus exhaled slowly. About time. June nodded, eyes softening. Your granddaddy would have been proud, baby. You made peace with the ghosts under your hood. Marcus smiled at her, but it was small and full of memory. I think he'd say the same thing he always did. Don't get cocky till the bolt stops squeaking. June laughed so loud it startled the shop dog dozing under the lift. That man had a saying for everything. When she left, the garage fell back into its steady rhythm, the radio humming, tools clinking, the faint hum of conversation from the front office. Around noon, Chloe and Marcus stepped outside for lunch. The pier stretched wide and quiet, gulls circling over the water. For a long while, neither spoke. Then Chloe said softly, It's strange, isn't it? After everything, it's quiet now. Quiet's not bad, Marcus said. Sometimes it's just peace showing up in work clothes. She looked at him with that half smile that always carried both gratitude and wonder. When I first met you, I thought you were just stubborn. Turns out, you were listening to things I couldn't hear. He shrugged. You were just talking too loud to notice the song. She laughed under her breath. Maybe so. Her expression turned thoughtful. You know, there's a new foundation starting next month, the Davenport Engineering Fellowship. We're funding scholarships for students who can't afford big universities. Real kids, hands-on kids, the kind your grandfather would have taught. He grinned. That's a legacy worth building. That's yours too, she said. You gave me the courage to do it. For a moment, the wind carried only the sound of waves slapping against the pier. Marcus turned toward the water. Your father once told me that courage wasn't about not being afraid. It was about driving, even when the fog's too thick to see the road. I think he'd like what you've built. She felt her throat tighten. No, she said softly. What we've built. When they went back inside, a small boy was standing by the front door, maybe 9 or 10, eyes wide as he stared at the rows of shining cars. He wore a backpack too big for his shoulders. Excuse me, he said shyly. My mom says you fix old cars. My grandpa's truck doesn't run anymore. She said maybe you could tell me why. Marcus knelt down so their eyes were level. What's her truck sound like when it tries to start? The boy thought hard, then mimicked a stuttering noise with his mouth. Marcus smiled. That's a good impression. Sounds like she's got a tired starter or maybe a bad connection. Can you fix it? The boy asked. Sure, Marcus said. But how about I show you how to figure it out yourself first? The boy's eyes lit up and Chloe felt something warm bloom in her chest. She leaned against the counter, watching Marcus guide the child to a simple diagram on the wall. His voice was patient, gentle, full of the same quiet confidence that had once infuriated her. Now it was the sound of everything she'd learned to trust. When the boy left, clutching a small wrench Marcus had given him as a gift, Chloe turned to him and said, You realize that's how it starts, right? Some kid goes home with that wrench, and 20 years later, he's building something better than both of us. Marcus laughed. Then we did our job. As the afternoon light slanted across the shop floor, she looked around at the cars, the tools, the open windows where sunlight spilled across everything they'd fought for. It was all ordinary now, beautifully, defiantly ordinary. He wiped his hands, glancing toward the clock. End of the day, he said. You hear that? Hear what? He smiled. The stillness, when all the machines finally rest. She closed her eyes, listening. The hum of the city faded until there was only that quiet pulse beneath it all, the heartbeat of the place they'd built, steady and alive. When she opened her eyes again, Marcus was already turning off the lights. He paused by the door, hand on the switch, and looked back at her. You coming? In a minute. He nodded and stepped out into the evening. The last of the sunlight caught the sign above the door, the painted letters glowing against the darkening sky. Chloe reached down, picked up the wrench the boy had left behind, and placed it on the workbench. Her father's old photo hung just above it. Guess we fixed it, Dad, she whispered. All of it. Outside, Marcus started the restored Mustang. The engine roared to life, deep and smooth, a sound that carried through the open bay door like a heartbeat calling her home. She smiled, locked the door, and walked toward it. The car idled softly as she climbed in beside him, the world settling into that calm rhythm only engines and forgiveness ever seemed to find. The road ahead stretched wide and golden, waiting, and as they drove into the fading light, the old man's voice seemed to linger in the wind between them. Every engine has a heart, and every heart deserves to be heard.